Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a seriously provocative documentary that basically challenges everything we've ever been taught to accept about our schooling. The source material we're looking at today argues that the traditional education system is absolutely not a launchpad for your success. Instead, it's a carefully constructed trap literally designed to create obedient workers. I know, it's a huge claim, but the creator actually backs it up with this really fascinating look at history, economics, and psychology.
So let's get right into it. The source material kicks things off with a pretty striking comparison. Think about guys like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Gautam Adani, and Richard Branson. Now, besides being some of the richest people on the planet, what do they actually have in common? Well, as the documentary points out, they all completely avoided this educational path that the source describes as a trap. They essentially stepped off the conveyor belt while, according to the creator, the average student just stays on it, desperately trying to follow all the rules.
And staying on that conveyor belt leads to what they call the scripted life. You know the drill, right? Step 1, you spend years maintaining perfect attendance and just memorizing books to get a degree. Step 2, you use that degree to beg for a job. Step 3, you immediately take out a massive home loan and a car loan because, well, that's what successful adults are supposed to do. And then step 4, you just lock yourself into a lifetime of paying monthly EMIs, living in this constant low-level fear of losing your job because you've got bills to pay.
Which brings us to a really crucial question the documentary asks us to think about. Is this cycle actually your dream life? Like, did you genuinely want this, or have you just been engineered from childhood to accept this as the absolute only valid path to survive? Are you actually living your dream, or are you just a really highly functional cog in someone else's machine?
Let's look at the reality of actually pursuing this script. You grind for 15 solid years just to get a degree. You sacrifice all your free time, your parents spend an absolute fortune, and you do everything by the book. But the harsh reality for so many people out there, as the source heavily emphasizes, isn't some lucrative, guaranteed career at the end of the rainbow. Instead, it's just endless rejection. It's sitting in a waiting room, feeling your self-esteem totally crumble, dealing with societal mockery, and just desperately praying to get any job at all just to survive.
And the documentary backs this up with some pretty brutal data. Get this. A staggering 42% of graduates under the age of 25 in India find themselves completely unemployed. Almost half of the youth who did exactly what they were told, took all the exams and got the shiny degrees, are left with absolutely nothing to show for it. The creator argues that the system promised them a secure future and it completely failed them.
All right, part 1, History of Obedient Workers, Uncovering the Master Plan. To understand why the source believes we're trapped today, it actually takes us back in time. The creator traces the origins of this whole trap through 3 massive historical milestones. We start over 200 years ago in Europe with a huge military defeat. Then we move through the crazy economic shifts of the Industrial Revolution, and finally, we arrive at the colonial policies implemented in India back in 1835. So picture this. It's 1806. The Prussian army, which was considered one of the best in the world at the time, suffers a totally humiliating defeat against Napoleon. The Prussian leaders dug into it and realized their soldiers lost because they were actually thinking independently on the battlefield instead of just blindly following orders. To make sure that never happened again, they designed an 8-year compulsory schooling system. Its one and only purpose? To eradicate free will and mass-produce these mindless, perfectly obedient soldiers who would never ever question their superiors.
Fast forward a bit to the Industrial Revolution, spanning from 1760 to 1840. The whole global economy shifted from farming and independent businesses over to factory labor and mass production. But factory owners ran into a huge problem. Literally nobody wanted to give up their independent life to do repetitive, mindless labor in a factory all day. The documentary explains that these wealthy corporate owners basically just adopted that old Prussian schooling system. They needed to brainwash kids early on, kill their creativity, and leave them believing that their only option for survival was to become an obedient, unquestioning laborer.
Bringing this global master plan closer to home for India, the source highlights a really chilling quote from Thomas Babington Macaulay in 1835. The British were a tiny minority trying to rule over a massive population, right? So, through the English Education Act, they implemented this exact same schooling model. Macaulay explicitly stated that the goal was to create a class of people, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste and in intellect. They were mass-producing compliant clerks and sepoys, local soldiers, people who would faithfully serve their colonizers without ever raising a voice against them.
Now, fast forward to today, and the documentary claims we are still entirely caught up in this modern illusion. Today, schools are way less about actual education and more about just being a status symbol for parents. You walk into school as a curious, creative kid, but you're immediately handed this incredibly strict syllabus. If you try to think outside the box, you're punished with bad grades. The ultimate goal drilled into your head isn't to innovate or build real wealth, but simply to land a sarkari, or government job. Why? Because it promises lifelong security, but only in exchange for lifelong obedience.
Which brings us to part 2, degrees vs. the harsh reality the system is breaking. The source really contrasts the shiny promise of these degrees with the actual on-the-ground economic reality today. The creator cites data from the International Labor Organization emphasizing that a massive 65% of the youth in India are currently jobless. That is a staggering majority of young, energetic people just sitting idle. According to the documentary, this is glaring, undeniable proof that this centuries-old system, which was designed for a factory-era economy, is spectacularly failing to deliver on its promises in the modern world.
To further drive this point home, the documentary points out a really shocking juxtaposition about the real value of these hard-earned degrees. An average, highly educated engineer in India is earning a tiny fraction of what a truck driver in the US makes. The source notes that a US truck driver can pull in anywhere from 10 to 12 lakhs a month. That is over $1 million rupees. That's literally 10 times more than what many engineers make here after years and years of grueling education.
And look, if you think the absolute top-tier students are somehow immune to this, think again. Even the most elite institutions aren't safe from this breaking system. The source provides some really worrying data from 2023, showing that dozens of students at India's premier engineering institutes, like we're talking 36 at IIT Bombay, 40 at IIT Delhi, and 31 at IIT Kanpur, remained entirely unplaced. If the system is failing the top 1%, the traditional route is clearly deeply, deeply flawed.
So let's look at part 3, how to break free, rewriting your script.
If the traditional education system really is just a trap designed for factory workers, how does the documentary suggest you actually break free? The creator anticipates the immediate reaction here and asks a super provocative question straight up. Does this mean we should just stop going to school? Should millions of people just abandon colleges entirely?
Well, the answer provided isn't necessarily dropping out of society completely, but it is about drastically shifting your focus and your values. The documentary advises leveraging the internet to learn high-income, modern skills directly from actual practitioners in the real world rather than relying on theoretical college degrees. It urges parents and students to prioritize real-world exposure over just a piece of paper with grades on it. Plus, it suggests normalizing taking a gap year to discover your actual passions and explore different opportunities, rather than only taking drop years to endlessly prep for highly stressful entrance exams like the JEE or NEET.
Ultimately, the source emphasizes a really powerful shift in mindset. Your goal in life shouldn't be to beg for a job where you just build someone else's dreams while living in constant fear of layoffs. The real goal is to become self-dependent. As the creator implies, you absolutely shouldn't let a terrified paycheck-to-paycheck life be your only legacy on this earth.
And that brings us to the end of our analysis. I want to leave you with the final, heavy challenge posed by the creator in this explainer. Knowing what you know now about exactly where this system came from, will you stay safely on the conveyor belt and just accept an average scripted life? Or will you be brave enough to step off, stop asking for permission, and build your own path? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning everything.